Hey everybody, welcome back. Hope you've had a great week. And yeah, today's video will be, I guess, something a little bit different. So I'm just going to be ripping into what I think will be a sort of fun and interesting topic. It's been on the list for me to get to at the right sort of spot to slot in. And today is really that right spot because, been super behind again all week and today. So I don't have any time to prep even for like catching up on a detail review or something like that. This is something that I think will be, quite of interest overall and something I can kind of rip into just step by step as I go without hopefully having things too terribly worded. I'm not going to do any low friction news today or test updates. We'll just jump straight into it because I've got a short span. And it's in short, we're going to have a bit of a look at, I guess, the difference between what sort of a lot of small businesses, like say Zero Friction Cycling is obviously a very small specialist store, and a lot of local bike stores. I guess why we need to sell at the recommended retail price for products, as opposed to being able to price match some of the prices that you can see online from the big high volume stores. So I guess really, how are the high volume online stores able to sell some products for the prices that they sell? What are their strategies behind that? And I guess the fun that can make for, obviously small businesses and specialist stores. It's certainly it's not all doom and gloom and bad news in terms of it's an unfair fight for small stores and so on versus the big players. There's pros and cons, I think, for, both in a way. But I think it's just of interest overall to know why sometimes it's just not viable at all for small stores and local bike stores to price match to a really low price that's being pumped out by a high volume store. So let's get into it and have a look at a few examples. All right, first up, we'll go through what should be the textbook case of what should happen when you're purchasing something from a retailer. There's a number of layers of parties that need to make money from the product that you're purchasing off an online store or from your bike store. Obviously, the store selling you the product needs to make money. They will, in most cases, have purchased that from a importer for that brand. So if we were looking at, say, a SRAM bicycle chain, the importer for SRAM for Australia is PSI Cycling. So that store will have purchased the chain from that importer at wholesale rates. The importer will have from SRAM importer pricing. So they're buying from the manufacturer at importer rates, so that, which are obviously going to be lower than wholesale. So they can then sell them wholesale to all the stores that they're servicing in the country and make, viable margin. And then obviously the manufacturer themselves need to make money on the products that they are selling to the importers. Now, I can't disclose exact, wholesale rates and margins and so on, but, a general, fairly common setup would be something like this. Now, from that approximate sort of 40% gross margin, we don't get to just pocket that $30 per chain and start planning a trip to Vanuatu. There's a whole lot of stuff that needs to come out of that. So that takes it down from what we'll call our gross margin to our net margin. So just some of the expenses will be, obviously we've got to pay GST on the sale. We've got staff wages plus on costs, so their superannuation and offsetting their taxes. IT and website costs, accounting and licensing fees, insurance, utilities, and there's a ton of other stuff on top of that all really add up. So from that approximate sort of 40% gross margin on the sale, we don't just get to pocket that, say, approximately $30 per chain and start planning our trip to Vanuatu. There's a whole lot of stuff that comes out of that. All the costs of actually running a business need to come from the gross margin that you're making on selling a product. So you've obviously got GST, staff wages, which includes their on costs such as superannuation and so on. You've got IT and website costs, you've got accounting and licensing fees, insurance, utilities, and there really is a ton of other stuff that also adds up to quite a bit. So after all of those expenses, you're left with a net margin. And we'll go into a bit of overshare because I'm not that much of a private person. I'll have a quick whiz through, the summary statement of the ZSC financials for the 2022-23 year. Alrighty, here we go. Overshare time. Wonder how many places will post their actual financials. So for the year ending 23, so total income for the year we had 369,083. I don't know if that sounds like a lot or a little. It probably depends where you work. Like the big players like, say, Bike, Bug and Pushies, probably doesn't take them too long into any given month to hit that total. But, for a small store with really not many people selling bicycle chains and bicycle chain lubricant, it takes a lot of work to generate that amount of revenue. The total costs, so just the costs of goods sold, so product we buy versus product we sell, so we take freight income out, servicing income out, 190,000, so that's basically 53%. So that's a bit better than the gross margin that we were sort of demonstrating before of sort of around 40%, but this is helped a bit by the fact that Zero Friction Cycling is the Australian importer for M-Speed wax, so I do get a better margin on M-Speed wax selling retail around Australia, and we sell a lot of M-Speed wax. So that really helps, which as you'll see is quite handy. So yeah, you get a bit of an idea of sort of how many expenses lines there are that all take bites out of things, as which goes obviously on top of the cost of actually purchasing the stuff you sell. And the net profit for myself, so ZSC is a sole proprietor business, so the net margin at the end of the day becomes my personal income. So for that year it was 61,819. So that's net margin, that's pre-personal income tax. So out of that there was still, I think it was a bit under 30% personal income tax. So I'm left with about sort of 40 something thousand. So, it's not, we're not planning trips to Vanuatu, obviously, off all this, but the idea of Zero Friction Cycling was to do something that I enjoy, and it's supposed to be a hobby business. Is a bit more work hours than planned, so a bit more than the hobby sort of side of things that it was, was the initial draft to the wife, but it's at least profitable for, the work and effort that we're putting in, as opposed to running at net zero or loss. So that helps us survive into the next year. But that basically works out to on gross revenue 16.7%. So the 61,000 basically divided into the 369,000, I'm at 16.7% net margin, and after tax it's around about 11% that I actually get into my pocket. Out of that, really, I'm also obviously supposed to be putting some away for superannuation, because that's not coming out of here for me, only for my staff, as opposed to buying more fun bike stuff. I may or may not have been putting something away for super. All right, I'll start off with the Shimano 12-speed M9100 chain, which is the Dura-Ace XTR level. Just because this one came up as an example today with a customer, and I'll move on to a Australian example I think after this one. But basically we can see Giant in Melbourne they're selling at what is basically exactly the recommended retail price of $119.99. Conduct to Berwick Cycles are selling the shorter 116 link version for $109.95. Bike Express, sort of the biggest store in my city Adelaide, are selling the 126 link one for a little bit under, at $109.95. Ducking to Zero Friction Cycling, so we sell that with only selling the Shimano those Shimano chains with a prep option. So the Ultrasonic Clean and M-Speed Wax is $139.90. So that's basically paying $20 above the recommended retail price for having the chain ultrasonically clean and M-Speed Wax prepped. Some chains we don't offer the chain just as is with factory grease. For instance, we do with the YBN. You can choose no option, no pre-prep option on that. The reason why we don't with some is simply it can either be the wholesale to retail price. There's just really not the margin there that justifies the process time, or it can be also a stock situation where we really struggle to get enough stock of those chains anyway, that selling them at the lower margin of having no prep option doesn't make sense when we're going to sell out in no time selling them with a prep option. So at least with a prep option we make a little bit on the chain and we make a little bit on the prep, and that really helps overall. So for some chain models, you'll see that there's, you know, the ability to purchase them as is with factory grease, and other chains we only sell them with some sort of pre-prep option for those reasons. So we're basically selling, though, as you can see, at pretty much on the RRP which we need to do. Now if we duck across to pushies, they are selling for $69.99. So obviously if you are any sort of normal person having a look on the old internet to purchase a new Shimano M9100 12-speed chain, and you see pushies selling it for $69.99, and then you see, say, the ZFC price or some other prices, you think, what is going on? Like, why are they selling it for so much? When really the question is, you know, how are pushies selling it for so little? Right, just have a quick look at one more example. So SRAM Eagle XX1 chain. You can see there that the recommended retail price, this is off the importer for SRAM's website, is $158. Now if we go across, there's all sorts of interesting stuff going on this one. So we can see pushies are selling a black XX1. Now normally the black, the rainbow, the gold and the copper XX1s, they're all the same you know, wholesale retail price normally of $158. There's not a price difference based on color usually. So price differences that are being put in by individual stores, I gather, just based on their own stock and availability. So here pushies are selling for $114.99, which is a heck of a lot less than the recommended retail price. Strangely, pushies are selling the rainbow one for $198, which is, well, basically $199, so that's basically $41 above the retail price. Not entirely sure what's going on there. Didn't find, so this, so back to, I think it was Berwick Cycles, they're discounting it from the retail price of $158 down to $134, so they're doing a bit of a deal. Zero friction cycling, if we go to, sorry, oh, I need to choose an option, one moment. So XX1 Rainbow, so pre-prepped with M Speed Wax, $179.90. So we're adding basically just over $20 for the pre-prep, you know, ultrasonic clean and wax version of the XX1 Rainbow on top of the normal retail price of the $158. So yeah, I mean, how can, say, a pushies / bike bug be selling a 12-speed Dura-Ace chain for $69.99, which has normally a retail of, say, $119, and an XX1 Eagle chain for $114 versus a recommended retail price of $158. Now, I can't divulge the, you know, obviously the exact wholesale numbers because we're not allowed to do that. But I can say that roughly, you know, those prices are, you know, more or less either a bit above or a bit below what the actual wholesale pricing is for those items. So how are they selling them at what is basically a wholesale pricing, which would leave you with no actual profit, obviously. If you are selling something for basically the same as what you bought it for, you not only make, I guess, $0 margin on the sale, but all those costs involved in actually making that sale happen and running the business are still there. So you are, you know, if you're not making money on the sale, you are making negative money if it's a $0 profit sale. You know, you are still having the cost of business and nothing actually revenue or net, you know, sort of dollars in your pocket from a sale to help pay for the costs of running the business. So, you know, what's going on with those prices and how can they do it? And it's obviously something that, you know, small businesses can't really price match. So I think that the Berwick that was sort of discounting back down to was it 138 or 134? At the end of the day, you know, discounting that down from the 158 mark, factoring in the cost of business, that would be a $0 sale. You know, even though there's going to still be some margin from the wholesale price to that sell price, it's not really leaving you with anything after you deduct everything else out. Now, I don't know this part 100%, but I know that in the case of SRAM, I'm more or less 99% certain that the likes of Pushies and Bike Bug, and there's potentially another high volume store as well in Australia, that are able to purchase direct from SRAM as opposed to having to purchase from the SRAM importer. So that gives them a pricing, or a purchase pricing advantage over all of the small to medium stores that have to purchase those same items through the importer, where there's that extra layer that has to be put on so that the importer can make money. So one part of it, is quite simply they may well be buying it at a price that we cannot purchase it for. With Shimano, I don't know if they're able to bypass Shimano Australia, but it's possible at a certain volume that they're getting them for a better pricing than what small to medium businesses will be able to get. That's pretty normal in just about all business sectors. So that's going to be part of it. But really the next part that we'll delve into, which is more the fun part, plays likely the bigger role overall in what the higher volume, bigger businesses are doing versus what small businesses can do. So a fairly common, strategy used by a lot of retail businesses to in the war against other retail businesses to win your customer dollars is to do what's called basically loss leader pricing. So you pick a bunch of products that are going to be fairly well searched by people, and we consumable products that people are likely to be wanting to buy fairly often, and you price extremely aggressively on those products. So you're either going to be making $0 margin on that or even a small loss on those products to get that person to your store. Because once you've got them on your store, they may well be adding other products at the same time. So, and hopefully those products you're going to make some actual margin on. Or at least in obviously the customer's perception is, wow, that pricing was amazing. I can just kind of rely that this store is always going to have the best pricing out there in the market. I don't really need to go searching and surfing the internet when I need to purchase something in this space. This is my go-to store, and I can kind of trust that whatever I'm adding to the cart, that's basically going to be the best price for that product that I'm likely to find, even if I spent the extra time hunting around. Why bother? Why get stuff from 3 or 5 different places? I can just add to cart here. So those loss leader products are really, it's like a marketing spend at the end of the day. A big store could spend $100,000 a month on marketing and advertising, or they could spend $50,000 on traditional marketing and advertising and budget $50,000 for loss leader products that they're going to, at the end of the day, have a cost, a net cost to the business to sell them at that price. But that's okay because they're doing a great job at actually bringing customers onto the site, into their store, getting signed up as a customer, and likely getting that person back to that store as the first port of call next time they need to buy something in the cycling space. So it's obviously a very smart and very strong strategy for getting and growing your customer base. So the big volume stores and big stores will do that strategy quite a bit, and you'll see that on chains, you'll see that on tires, where they're really making no money on some things at all to get you there. And that's cool, but it's obviously something that small stores can't really adopt the same pricing strategy as that to try to get people in. Some can to a degree, a much smaller volume on a much smaller range, but obviously there are limitations because you have to actually make money. And that leads into the final fun bit of all this, which is what can really be a key difference how small businesses need to operate on their week in, week out financials and quarterly financials and yearly financials, as opposed to how some of the bigger players are able to operate and how that may or may not work for them. So we'll wrap up with, a final key difference example between how a small business will be operating sort of week to week and quarterly and yearly versus the big players. So focusing obviously, say Zero Friction Cycling, very small business. And literally, so each week I will have had X amount of revenue come in for that week. And the first thing I do on a Monday morning is I'm transferring out of that money that I have X goes into all of these offset accounts, and they are the accounts that I will then be using to repurchase the stock that I've sold. So I'll be putting money away to repurchase M-Speed wax and YBN chains and Shimano chains and SRAM chains and all the other lubricants that we sell. So all of that gets offset, as well as other expenses and wages and GST. So there's a whole bunch of transferring that goes on so that I know that I've got the money set aside for stuff that I have to pay and purchase. Now, after having done all that, there are some weeks where I get to keep a little bit for myself, which is then, the sort of profit for the sole proprietor. But there can also be a bunch of weeks where literally it can be sometimes weeks in a row where after having made the necessary transfers, there is $0 left. And I very much feel like I've been working hard week after week to literally act like a money transit station, because there's no sort of fun money coming to me after all of that. But in the end, we obviously, as we saw from the financials, I end up with something, so it's okay. Big business is really quite different. So they really can be the epitome of money transit stations and really not know for quite some time if all of the work and volume that they're doing is actually making them any money. Often they do get weekly P&Ls and they get quarterly and yearly and so on. So it's really each quarter and yearly that they're having the bigger reviews on how are things actually going. But it can quite often be, and really I guess chain reaction cycles and Wiggle were a classic example of this, where they're selling so much stuff and often at great prices for the consumer. So they've got $1 bajillion a year of money coming in, but they've also got $1 bajillion plus of expenses and costs to actually run their business. And at the end of the day, there's only so long you can have, despite having massive revenue and volumes, of sales, if the costs exceed your revenue, if each year you're, making net dollars profit, negative dollars profit, you're in trouble. So big businesses will usually have obviously some line of credit. They're tapping into a line of credit. It might be their bank, or in chain reaction cycles and Wiggles case, it was private equity or venture capital. And due to the crunch with the pandemic and so on, that venture capital fund had other businesses that they were more concerned about, that they wanted to make sure survived. And so they said to Wiggle and chain reaction cycles, sorry, that extra funds that we were going to be able to allocate to you so you could stay afloat, we're pulling that. And so a business that's doing an absolute shit ton of sales and a shit ton of revenue coming in, at the end of the day, making negative profit from all of that, if you don't have access to funding to keep selling stuff for negative profit, then you go bankrupt. And that's what happened with them very quickly once that funding was pulled. So now with in Australia, like we don't know at the end of the day with say like the Bike Bug and Pushies, I have no idea if they just have a line of credit to a bank, or whether or not they are funded by private owners, whether or not at the end of each quarter and year they're making negative profit for all of that volume that they're doing, or if they're making a tidy profit and the business is going along great guns. I don't think we've got any sort of visibility or... So at the end of all of that, hope that all sort of made some sense and wasn't too horrifically worded. But yeah, basically that's why our sort of stance mostly is that we just sell at the recommended retail price. We don't sell higher than the recommended retail price. And on top of the recommended retail price, we actually pretty much have the best prices on the pre-prep chains that you will find out there in the world for professionally pre-prepped chains, not something that you're getting from some dude's kitchen on eBay. So yeah, it hopefully paints the picture that, really, if we go to price match high volume online stores, even if it's by a relatively sort of small percentage, I mean, we are literally looking at, so as we saw from the financials, even on a gross margin overall, because we're the importer for a couple of things of sort of 53%, we're left with a net margin of 16.7%. So the normal products that we're sort of purchasing from an importer, where we're going to have around about a 40% gross profit margin, we really, really need that to actually make any actual money at the end of the day after all expenses are considered. If we drop that price by even 20%, to sort of price match to something. So if we're to sell a product for sort of that should be a retail of $100, if we cut that down to $80, that's literally likely the difference between making $0 profit on that or making, say, hopefully somewhere between $10 and $20 of actual money for the work. And so now, remembering that, for a business, say like Zero Friction Cycling, where it's a sole proprietor, so I'm the small business operator for ZFC, that if there's not any actual profit, then I don't earn any money at all for the work. And so trying to have a strategy of greater volume, so greater amount of work for low margin or no margin, it really doesn't make any sense. So it'd be a bit like if your boss said, hey, we're currently paying you $40 an hour. How would you like to do twice the amount of work, but for $10 an hour? You'd probably go, well, I don't know if that's the best plan. I'd rather do a good amount of work for just a decent hourly rate, please. And this is another difference, I guess, with a big business. With a big business, so at Bike Bug and Pushies, again, the sales manager is getting paid, the CEO is getting paid, the operations manager is getting paid. They're getting paid each week their salary. They're earning their good dollars for their work. They're okay. As a sole proprietor, if you make $0 net profit that week, you make $0 net profit. If you make negative profit, you owe somebody money, and that money has to come from somewhere. So going for, I guess, a sales strategy of cutting costs to drive more volume in, to have more work at tiny to $0 or possibly negative dollars profit, obviously makes no sense. And small businesses like us, we just need that, already not amazing at the end of the day margin between the wholesale and the retail to be able to be viable. Right, and lastly, obviously, Zero Friction Cycling is a fair bit different to a lot of other, sort of stores in the space, in that our business model is quite different. A decent chunk of the revenue, I don't have a percentage because it's been hard to amortize over time, from the capital expenses of setting everything up to, to what it sort of costs ongoing, just buying new parts and keeping the test machines running. But, a decent percentage of the revenue goes into the testing side of Zero Friction Cycling to generate the knowledge resources in this space, which, really nobody else is obviously generating. So, and it's not just the testing, it's taking the time to put all the information resources up that we generate from the testing as well. So it's that whole other side of Zero Friction Cycling, which is funded by, or from the revenue from the retail side. Yes, we do a lot of private testing, but the private testing really only covers the costs of those tests and some of the time involved in conducting those tests and liaising with those clients, which is, again, very time intensive. So it doesn't really generate any sort of net profit revenue at the end of the day. It's more or less just trying to cover the cost involved. So yeah, it's the retail side, selling the stuff at the recommended retail price, that enables the testing side of Zero Friction Cycling to exist, and all the information resources that come from that side of the business. So yeah, it is sort of a fairly unique, I guess, cost and time expense that other businesses, online would not have. So yeah, all right, that'll be enough rambling for me. Hopefully this one wasn't as terribly worded as last week. I do not know. I've just smashed through it again. We'll see. Have a great weekend. Formula One on again, and MotoGP and World Cup MTB, which I have no idea how I'm going to actually get to watch, but we will have a crack. And I will try to duck back in and have a look at have a chat over comments where I can over the weekend. But yeah, otherwise, have a great low friction weekend. Try to get lots of cycling in. I'll be trying to smash a bit out as well. I've got some couple of longer races coming up in the next couple of weekends, so I better get out there off my. I do enjoy my snacks these days. I've got to try to train at least in line with my level of snacking. And yeah, I will hopefully be back again next week to try to smash out another quick one in the lead up to the holidays. All right, catch you then.